The Fairfield County Infirmary still stands on its lonely hill, the red brick walls weathered by centuries of sorrow. Once a home to the sick, poor, and the forgotten, its rooms have been soaked up by stories of suffering and maybe something else. Tonight, we're going to walk through its darkened halls, where paint peels up like old dead skin, and whispers come throughout all the empty wards. They say shadows move on their own, that voices call out from rooms long forgotten. Some claim the restless never left. Tonight, we have a guest who went there to find out.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What do you see when you're in the dark and the demons come?
Houston, we have a problem.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Welcome to Buried Stories. I'm Jeff Mercurio. With me, Wendell Brown. Wendell, how are you?
Hey, Jeff, how are you tonight?
Good, good. Tonight, Wendell, we got a ghost hunter on the program. We'll get to him in a moment. But the first place we're going to talk about, Wendell, is the Fairfield County Infirmary. Now, if you go throughout YouTube, you can find this place all over YouTube. It's a very famous haunted place. It was opened up in 1828 as a poorhouse institution, common in those days, 1800s. You know how people say, hey, you're going to lead us to the poorhouse? There were actual poorhouses. But this house was for the poor, the sick, the elderly, and those unable to support themselves. Over time, it became shelter to orphans, the mentally ill, and people with disabilities. The original structure was a modest wooden building, but late in the 19th century, it became a much larger brick building. Living conditions were often harsh. Residents expected to work the fields and inside the infirmary if they could. It has a small cemetery out back. Residents without family were buried, and the people that just had no money were buried there as well. Over 2 centuries, people have witnessed countless tragedies, illness, poverty, mistreatments, and untimely deaths. And it is, according to a lot of people, one of the most haunted places. So let's welcome our guest, Steve Mercurio. Welcome to the show.
Oh, hello.
Well, Steve, you are interested in ghost hunting. How long ago did you really become interested and said, well, I'm going to start doing these things. I'm going to start going to these places to investigate?
Well, I obviously you guys are probably familiar at this time with my obviously history growing up in haunted house, but when I actually started doing, visits to some of these locations is probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I was watching, I watch a lot of paranormal content, different shows. I used to watch it on Travel Channel. There was a group on Travel Channel. Back then it was called Destination Fear. And that was the first time I heard of Fairfield County Infirmary. They have a very, if anybody's out there familiar with Destination Fear, now it's called Project Fear on YouTube. That episode where they visit Fairfield County Infirmary, it's actually one of their more popular episodes. Anybody who's familiar with them know that they stay the night. They couldn't stay the night there. That's how haunting it was. Yeah.
So how'd you set up for this trip? Did you have to make reservations, and how long did it take to get there? I mean, Lancaster is really close to where you live in Columbus, correct?
Yeah. So I'm kind of on the southeastern side of Columbus. I'm actually in Fairfield County, just on one of the tips there. And so Lancaster's probably about 25, 30 minutes away. I didn't actually realize how close this place was. It's kind of unique. It actually sits. The odd thing, I would say it's an odd thing because it actually sits right across from their high school. There's quite a few buildings right there in that area. You wouldn't even know by looking at it. And believe it or not, from my understanding, it also used to be their health department, the Fairfield County Health Department, for many years as well.
All right, so walk us through your ghost hunting experience there. What kind of equipment you used? How hyped up were you going into this? Were you nervous? I mean, this is your first one, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was lucky enough to be at the Fairfield County Infirmary twice now. Going back, it was the very first place I visited. I took my son with me, and we found the place on Facebook. They had a really good setup, like a website dedicated to Fairfield County on Facebook. They show all their calendars of events and everything. So my son and I kind of, we signed up for it, had no idea what to expect. Essentially, you get to tour the building from about, I believe we entered around 7 p.m. At that time, we could stay as late. I want to say it was like 4 a.m. You could stay till if you wanted to. And, there was a group of about maybe 18 to 20 people, different levels of paranormal experience. We had some people there that must have had a YouTube channel, had all kinds of amazing equipment, some of the best, cameras I've seen, all the way down to me showing up with just my EMF detector. And I think I had just a digital recorder, at that time, a couple, flashlights and whatnot, and that's essentially what we showed up with. So
Now, walk us through some of these experiences that you had going through this place.
So what was cool is the first thing we got to do was we went down. I want to say it's on the basement floor or the main floor of the building. They have this special room that they utilized as essentially a funeral parlor. It was kind of a double room. There was a coffin in the room that they kind of keep in there just for decoration. But, they walked us through. We all sat down, and they were telling us kind of the history. But they sat down. I noticed they had set down a couple of those cat balls, the ones that flash. And
Yeah.
then they also put up 2 of the flashlights, the mag lights. They put those mag lights up on the windowsill, and cat balls, they put a couple across the floor. Nobody was near the cat balls. Nobody was definitely near those mag lights. I've seen that performed on, different shows that I've watched in the past. So,
Right.
First thing they start talking about is they start asking some questions. And the first thing I noticed was one of these mag lights turned on by itself. Now it slowly turned on. It just, and nobody was near it. We're all kind of just looking at it like, oh, okay. And then it slowly shut off on its own. And then, they'd ask some more questions. Occasionally, one of these mag lights would come back on, go back off. And then the other thing I noticed, that cat balls, that portion of the ground is cement. And so you can go up and stomp right next to these cat balls and they wouldn't go off. And we had a couple of them by the door that were just going off. Nobody was near it, just would go off randomly. So that was kind of how the evening began. We visited several floors, went down to the morgue area. It was there, be honest with you, a lot of it was quiet. I didn't know what to take from it. And then when we went up, there's a watchtower. If you look at photos, there's this little watchtower that comes up. You take this tiny ladder up. It's a very small room, but it has glass on all 4 sides. And what it was explained to us was that the warden or his wife, and yes, they did call him the warden, the guy who ran the place.
Right.
And they did refer to the people that lived there as essentially prisoners or, inmates, essentially call them inmates. But it was told to us that the warden or his wife would go up on this watchtower and look around. And what they would do is if they saw somebody not working, they would go down and they'd call everybody together and they would beat that person in front of the rest of the people to show them like, hey, this is what happened if you don't do your work. Okay. So my son and I are up there standing around, kind of looking out the windows. A little hard to see. It's nighttime. It's darker outside than it is during, inside. But then suddenly my son and I heard this loud scream, like a man screaming in pain. Now, my son had this weird look. He looked at me like, what was that, Dad? And I just kind of like, well, probably the smokers outside having a cigarette, laughing it up. I didn't know what to tell him. Didn't sound
Right.
like that to me, but I didn't know what to tell him. So we make our way back downstairs where the group is, And I asked the smokers when they came in, it was these 3 wonderful women, they came in, and I said, "Hey, when you guys were outside, did you hear a man scream?" And they were like, "No, there was no one screaming outside." I'm like, "Okay, were you guys laughing real loud or something?" They're like, "Nope." And I'm like, "Well, we heard a man scream about 10 minutes ago." And they're like, "Telling you, we were outside that whole time. No one was screaming." Now, here's what I find odd about that, okay? About 6 months after visiting there, I rewatched the episode where Destination Fear went in, and they were sending one person in at a time, and the 3 people were outside waiting while the other person would do a solo. And while they were out there, 3 of them heard a man scream outside. And it dawned on me 6 months later. I went back and told my son, like, "Son, they heard that scream too." So I just kind of found, look, I'm not going to say it's paranormal, but I definitely found that interesting. Now, going back to the that you had mentioned the cemetery. Cemetery
Right.
is very unique. So you have the building up front, and then you have this large hill in the back. Okay, and when you go up there, you'll notice that there's some chained areas, like just these like little tiny cement pillars, kind of maybe blocking off some of this the cemetery. But there's a couple private headstones, but then there's basically one larger headstone all the way in the back of the field that just says, to honor our dead. Okay.
Yeah.
What was explained to us about it was that the bodies were actually buried vertically so that they could make more room, because there's thousands of bodies in there. So they
Wow.
buried them vertically so they could fit more bodies in
Wow.
there. And one
Yeah.
of the stories they were telling us is that after the health department moved out of the building, they wanted to sell it off to a private business. Well, the private business wanted to knock down the building and build whatever building they wanted to, but they brought in the ground penetrating radar, and they said not only did they find thousands of bodies buried in that back hill, there were bodies buried right next to the building, and they basically turned down the sale and just like, there's nothing we can do with this building because we can't tear it down. There's too
That's
many
great.
bodies. We can't dig it up. There's too many bodies. So essentially, later somebody of the paranormal interest went ahead and purchased it. And so every time you go and visit places like this, you're actually donating to keep this going.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Now, up on the cemetery, I didn't notice this. So my son and I are kind of up there walking around. It's probably 12:30 at night, maybe closer to 1. And we're heading back towards the headstone, just kind of checking it out. There's woods right behind it. And I saw my son just start running away from me. He just seriously started running in one direction towards the building, and then stopped and changed his direction, a different direction, and booked it. Never told me what was going on. I'm sitting there like, Dom, what's going on? He's gone. He's gone. Now I'm
Yeah.
sitting up on the cemetery like, oh, okay, I don't know what just happened to Dom, but something scary happened to him. So I walk back to the building and I get with him and I'm like, Dom, what happened? And the story he told me was he was looking towards the woods and he saw a woman wearing a dress, just booking it in her bare feet, just like running faster than he's ever seen a human run across the field. And then next thing you know, when he started running away from it, he said the next thing you know, the lady was on his right side this time, running with him. And so he changed his direction and ran back to the building. Now, I didn't see it. I was up there the whole time. I didn't see it. But we were just talking about the story the other day, and he's like, yeah, he was trying to explain it to a friend of his and
Yeah.
also my daughter about what he saw. So, I mean, it's definitely an interesting place to be. The second time we went to what they call they have a flashlight night. Basically, you pay $20. Anybody can come in. So the first time we went was more of a private ghost hunt. They weren't going to let anybody else in except these 20. That was it, just the workers and these 20 people. And they basically kind of make sure no one else enters, exits, whatever. The second time was a flashlight to where anybody can enter the building anytime. You pay your $20. You stay, I think it was like 7 to midnight, right? So my daughter had never been there, and we took one of my son's friends with us. Well, we were down. It was just after we arrived. It was probably like 8 o'clock. We were down in the basement, and I got a toy. I got a ghost radio. First time I'm using a ghost radio.
Yeah.
So I'm in this back room in the basement. I was with my kids and their friend, and then I'm sitting there listening to the ghost radio, asking questions. I'm getting a little bit of gibberish, a little this, a little that. Suddenly, these two girls enter the room that I don't know, and they ask like, "Hey, can we hang out?" And yeah, go for it. So I'm talking to them about, places I've visited and everything. My son and all of them leave the room. So now it's just me and these two 20-something-year-old girls. I'm looking at them. The girl on her left, on my right, she has an EMF detector just held in her hands. The girl on my left that I'm looking at, we're just telling these stories. And then suddenly I see the girl on the left just start like looking around like something touched her or something. I mean, she's like, we're having a conversation. Suddenly she's just like looking around like, and I'm watching her and I didn't say anything. I'm watching her spin around, looking around. And then suddenly the right side of my body only got the chills, only the right side of my body. So I look at her, she's still looking around. And I looked at her and I said, "Hey, did you just experience something? Because let me tell you what just happened to me." I'm like, the right side of my body only just got the chills and I felt something cold. And she goes, "Oh my God, I felt like something cold just went right through me." And then right as we're talking about this, the EMF detector in the other girl's hands just starts going nuts. I mean, just like nothing. She didn't shift it. She didn't move it. It's just sitting there going nuts. And it was probably like a 2 or 3. Now, I've never in all my years had only one side of my body get the chills. And that was it. There were no open windows. There was nothing. It was very odd. Very odd. Yeah.
Now, isn't the calling card for Fairfield in that the patients are lingering and the screams, right? Isn't that the notoriety that it's known for?
Yeah, it's also known to have up on, I want to say it's the second or third floor, they have what they consider like the jail room. So they have one room that has a steel cage door, okay? And going back to that Destination Fear, what made that episode famous was they caught it on camera. The door just just opened on its own and shut. And I mean, you see it clear as day, like on their footage. There's no one near it at all. So it's known for that room to be quite active. And also up in the attic, there are chains hanging off the walls. From what was explained to us up in the attic, part of the ward was the children's ward.
Yeah.
But right next to the children's ward, they put the really, we'll call them mentally ill patients, the screamers, the people just screaming bloody murder. They would chain them to the wall. And you could see the chains are still sitting there, and so are the cement hooks that are sitting up there. So just, pretty odd. And, also the morgue down in the basement, they explained to us that during the winter, you can't dig up the ground. So what they would do is they'd take the dead bodies and they would put them in the freezer right next to their food until the ground thawed enough where they could bury the bodies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, did you hear anything, any audio from that? Did you guys try to get some, like voice phenomena or anything?
Yeah, I was going through my EVPs. I was just starting to kind of dig into them because I finally got them uploaded from my digital recorder. And I was actually listening, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to it carefully, but I think I might have caught, I have to check it, but I might have caught that man's scream when Dom and I were up in that watchtower. I just listened to it right before this episode, and I think I might have heard that man scream, but I have to go back and listen to it, better ears, kind of raise the volume up. But and now I didn't get as many EVPs as I wanted, but somebody that was there has this Panasonic one that is world famous with paranormal researchers. It was a digital recorder made in the late 90s or early 2000s. These Panasonics fetched thousands of dollars for a used one.
Wow.
And people used to complain to the company, it was Panasonic. People used to complain to the company that they were picking up things that they didn't hear. And so the company discontinued them and then came out with a new one that wasn't maybe as sensitive. Well, all of those old Panasonic ones are now extremely expensive because what they realize is they were picking up what they thought to be ghost voices.
Right.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because one of the workers there had one of these Panasonic that she was borrowing from somebody. And I wouldn't get that many digital, EVPs on mine, but we'd be in a room and she'd play hers and you'd hear a little something. And I know, I don't know if she's doing something. I'm sitting there watching her operate. It's an old, it's even before digital, it's an older digital recorder, it's an older, tape recorder. And so I'm assuming she didn't touch it in any or manipulate it in any way, but she would pick up some stuff. And then also, this last time we were there was the first time we attempted to do the Estes method. And for those who may not know what the Estes method is, you take a ghost radio, you put headphones on somebody, you usually cover their eyes, and they can't hear you. And the whole purpose of it is for them to scream out what they're hearing on the ghost radio, but they can't hear the questions you're asking.
Right.
So the whole idea is you're utilizing this human being kind of as a voice for whatever they're hearing. And then that way they can't sit there and try to give you an answer related to your question. They're only blurting out. So we were up in this one toy room the last time we were there. My daughter was doing the EVP. We made her go in this little kind of creepy, little playhouse that kids would go in when they're much younger. There was a
Right.
little seat in there. We made my daughter go sit there. We covered her eyes. Probably 2 or 3 minutes into it, she said something touched her neck. And she freaked out. She threw those headphones off real quick, was like, I'm done with this. I'm done. Something touched my neck. And so that was interesting. But when we were doing that, the Estes method, we got a couple things. But what was even cooler is one of those girls that we were hanging out with, they rented this equipment. It was kind of like a ghost radio, but a little bit different. And we were in that jail room. And we got some very odd answers to our questions. So yeah, just overall, pretty interesting. It can be a very active environment.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate this place?
I'd probably give it a solid 7, honestly. And I'm rating it. I would consider, a 7 for me is really good. I mean, that means that you're going to experience probably something, so.
All right, on to the next one. Wendell, you got some information on the next place?
Yeah, it's the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So the name is but before I go into the Trans Allegheny, the one, growing up, I grew up around a mental hospital, and not in one, Jeff, around one. I won't say I grew up around it. I was around it. And then in my business years, I had to do some business inside of it. And it's a hospital, but everybody knows what it really is. It's a place to dump people,
Yeah.
and dump people that society can't deal with, doesn't know how to deal with, hopeless situations. And, it's the same type deal, central building, big fenced in property, and occasionally they would catch people that got out of the building, they'd catch them off by the fence, or they'd get out in the neighborhoods and things like that, and they'd catch them, but not the happiest of environments. So I'm a little familiar with those kind of institutions, but I tell you what, this Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Steve, it was wicked. From just what, if any of the stuff that I saw about it was true, it was a wicked facility. I mean, they were giving these people shock therapy, and that was the minor stuff, and ice baths, just any kind of brutality I never witnessed brutality when I was around that facility I referenced, but I guess this place was just nothing but brutality. And it was overcrowded in the 1950s. It was built in, I believe, 1864. And it was overcrowded in the 50s. So, I think it finally closed in 1994. So 44 years of overcrowded, abusive, uh, ridiculous kind of stuff. And that is on top of the mental health part that, there's people that went in there with the hopes of helping people, some of them, and, they just faced a hopeless situation in some cases. But this one, I was kind of shocked by the brutality that I read about it, as well as Steve. You can help me here. It referenced a girl, Lily. Are you familiar with that? Uh,
Is that the little girl?
yeah, the little girl named Lily.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's one of their claims to fame as far as the hauntings is that little girl, Lily. But Steve, you can tell you've been there, right? Multiple times or once?
Just one time I went there. Two places have always been kind of at my top of my bucket list as far as paranormal explorations. Trans Allegheny and Waverly Hills, right? So Trans Allegheny we did back in October of 2024. First place I got to take both my children. And what an interesting. First of all, it's in a town, if I believe it's Weston, West Virginia. And you know what's interesting? It's a relatively small town, but boy, does that Trans Allegheny, it's like almost like right in the heart of the city. I mean, it just stands out. It's almost like the city built around Trans Allegheny because, when you see Trans Allegheny, when you look at it, it will blow your mind how big it is. But then what you're not seeing is there's so many buildings in the back behind the main building. Different, like geriatric wards, medical buildings. They even had a criminally insane portion, a building back there. So, but yeah, boy, I tell you, that one stands out. Absolutely. As soon as you take a look at it.
Well, what made you want to go to that one so bad, and what drew you to it?
Okay, so
Besides the
um,
obvious one I read about and the haunting part of it, but where a lot of these others are patients hanging around, it doesn't really say that about this place as much as the brutal behavior and the unmarked graves and things like that. But go ahead, you tell us a little bit about what you saw and what drew you there.
Well, I think what first drew me there is, over the years I've watched shows as far back as like Ghost Hunters. Obviously, I believe Ghost Adventures also had an evening there or a show there. There's Kindred Spirits I believe, had a show but the one that stands out to me, for me, other than, again, Destination Fear went there. But the one that stands out to me is a show called Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff and Katrina Weidman. It is their very first show. And anybody who's familiar with that show or may not be familiar with it, they essentially lock themselves into these places for 72 hours. They do not leave. They sleep in there, they eat in there, and the whole time they're essentially doing a paranormal investigation. Well, in that episode, there's a crawler, and their cameraman Rob sees it right behind them in night vision. You could see something crawling. It looks like a human crawling on the ground right next to the wall behind them, like a little shadow. And boy, when your eyes see it, you can't unsee it. It was downright scary. So I remember seeing that, like, oh my God, I have to go to this place. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, man, I have to go. So, what was interesting is we were group 2. There's probably about, I'd say about maybe 40 people total in our group. Now, they separate the groups this way. You can either choose to do the main building for the whole time you're there, or you can do a combination of the back buildings. I think they take you to 3 separate buildings in the back, but you got to choose one or the other. The first time we went, we chose the main building. And there's 4 floors to the main building. There might be like a basement. They didn't let us in the basement. But essentially there's 4 floors, and each floor has essentially wings that come off the main. And then what's cool is each of the corridors, each of those wings have 2 separate areas. Okay. So you have a hallway that leaves the main building, goes off to your right, and then another one that goes off from there. And each hallway has about, if I had to guess, about 20 rooms, give or take. Okay. Now, we were group 2. We had about 10 people with us, but we got to break up in groups of 4 out of those 10 and go off into the hallways on our own. So what I loved about it was nobody was going to be in the hallway except our tiny group. Now, you could switch off with some of the other groups. As soon as you were done kind of exploring, you can go tap on one of the other groups like, hey, are you guys good? Can we take over this portion? And vice versa. So we started up, you had mentioned Lily, Wendell. We actually started on the 2nd floor. There is a room dedicated. I believe it's dedicated to Lily. There's a bunch of toys in there, balloons in there and whatnot. And so the first kind of weird thing we had happen there was my daughter sat down on the ground and started talking to Lily very nicely, wanting to sit there and play like, hey, do you want to play? Things of that nature. Now, when she sat down, my son and I walked out of the room, but kind of kept our heads in the doorway to watch what was going on. So we noticed only one balloon started moving, but we're like, it's a balloon. Who cares? My daughter's looking like, hey, Dad, look, look, look. And there's other balloons around it that aren't moving, but only one of them. So I was like, well, we just exited the room. Don't worry about it. Maybe it was just us. Couple minutes goes by. She's asking more questions. And suddenly that same balloon starts moving around more. Again, there's balloons all around it. None of those other balloons are moving, only this one. And so I'm not going to say it's paranormal, but I did kind of think that was a little bit weird. And you'd get the occasional knocking and stuff like that. So then they took us up to ward, the 3rd floor, and they explained to us that this is the most violent ward. This is where they kept the teenage men or teenage boys, and that by far they were probably some of the most violent people there, inmates or patients, whatever you wanted to call them. And so, they also showed us an area where they had these cells, and if somebody was really bad there, that you would be chained by your arms to the wall, and then you'd have a chain around your neck, and you'd have a chain around both your legs and your waist. And the whole point of it was that you could not rest. If you attempted to lay down or like try to, let your body droop down, it'd start choking you, or the chains on your arms would pull, and they would put people in these positions for like 12 hours at a time, sometimes longer. Now, one of the more famous stories one of the more famous stories up on the 3rd floor, right after those punishment wards, they have their own kind of jail area, and anybody who was bad got put into that jail for however much time. But it was a bigger room, and there were multiple people that would be shoved in there. Well, there was a kid or a man who was sent in there, and he was said to have kind of more of a childhood, I guess IQ. And he just had a bad day, but he was shoved in there with a couple of other true criminals. And these criminals kept tying a rope over this pipe up on the ceiling and putting it around his neck, and they'd lift him up in the air, and then they would drop him. And they kept doing this to the point that he started to pass out. They would slap him. They would make him get back up. And then after they got bored, the story says that they took one of the bed corners, put it right on his head, and they kicked it until it essentially went into his skull.
Oof.
And they killed him that way, right in that room. So, surprisingly, with all that said, we really didn't have as much active things going on in the third floor, which was surprising for as violent as it was stated to be. They talked about nurses who were killed by patients up in that floor, things of that nature. And you had that story and everything. It was actually pretty quiet, surprisingly,
Hmm.
on the third floor. Now, when we got to the fourth floor, though, they explained that back then, they had a fire and it had burned. That the fourth floor used to be kind of the barracks for the workers there. Okay, this was at the time that people didn't really have good transportation to get to and from work. A lot of those nurses and stuff stayed up on the fourth floor. They had private residences up there. Well, at one point, that portion actually burned up in a fire. So when they rebuilt it with wood floors, and they actually turned it into kind of more of a sobriety ward. Okay. And this is where our guide told us, like he said, listen, put away all your toys, put away all your bells and whistles. You don't need them up here. You want to truly experience something. My suggestion is you go and sit in the middle of the hallway, let your eyes acclimate to the little bit of light you'll have, and just sit there and be silent and take it in. He goes, I promise you, you're going to experience something. So we break up in our groups. And what was interesting was we had two men who went off to the furthest ward to our right. We were in that second ward, and we had groups that went off into the other left wards by themselves. Well, the guys went off, left our area, it was just us. We had a little bit of something, some noises, some this, that, until we heard this loud crash. And it sounded like it came from the ward where those two gentlemen were. Not a minute after we heard this loud crash, those two men came running. They had the fear of God in their eyes. And they ran out of that ward and came right up to us like, oh, hey, guys, all right, time to switch. We were like, okay, why do you want to switch so bad? And they're like, well, okay, well. And we were like, no, seriously, why do you guys want to switch so bad? And they're like, okay, did you just hear that crash? And we were like, yeah, we thought it was you guys. They were like, no, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. And so we were like, well, what happened? And the guy goes, well, we had asked the spirits if they wanted us to leave, make a noise, and then crash. And they came running out of that ward. So that, hey, it's all you. It's planned for you guys. You guys are ready to go. So we're like, all right, let's go. Let's go check it out. We go back in that furthest hallway, and we did exactly what the guide said. We had shut off our flashlights. My son is across the hallway from me. He's leaning up against the wall. I have my daughter on my right side. I have a room about 4 feet to my left. I have my daughter has a room about 4 feet to her right. And we start hearing some like knocking, a little bit of knocking that seemed to be coming down from the hallway. Now, what was weird was I kept hearing shuffling in the room 4 feet to my left. And I would stop and I'd kind of reach over there and look in there, turn on my flashlight for a second. There's no one in this room. So I'm like, okay, all right. And then my daughter, this is the first time she got super scared. She grabbed my arm like she hadn't all night. She was holding onto my arm and she kept telling me that something was peeking around the corner, like some dark shadow from the room that was 4 feet to her right. Okay. Now my son is occasionally turning on his flashlight into the room that she swears something keeps pointing its head out or something. And I keep trying to ask him, well, what are you seeing? He goes, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. I have no idea. So after a while, we're just sitting there asking questions and we're getting some occasional knock responses to the questions. And then suddenly we hear footsteps come out of the room where my daughter said something was in, and it just kind of walked past us and then just suddenly stopped. Like it either stopped. No, that was the Wendell. I didn't see anything. All I heard was that because that was the first time the wooden floors. And so everything really was, as far as sound goes, was really magnified, right? And I'm telling you, just it wasn't the loudest sound you ever heard, Wendell, but it definitely sounded like footsteps coming out of that room in between my son and us, and then stopped maybe a room down and just stopped. And
Wow.
we're looking at each other like, what the heck did just happen? And so, yeah, I mean, and then I made my kids, you know what? I'm like, you know what, kids, leave me up here for like 10 minutes. And I just kind of sat and just took it in, was trying to get some call and responses with knocks and stuff like that. But that floor was absolutely active. That was probably one of the more, I'd say, paranormal evidence. And you know, I wasn't recording anything or anything. We were just kind of doing what the guy told us to do. Just shut off everything, try not to use flashlights, just take it in. And boy,
Right.
that hallway right there was super active.
So that's the one that when I was looking up the place, that's the one that has the crawler.
Yeah. So
Is that
yeah.
is that Trans Allegheny or Waverly?
Yep. No, that they say that they might say they have a crawler at Waverly. You know, it's the phenomenon's kind of notorious with haunted buildings and everything. But definitely, that was the first thing that the guy told us when we got up to the 4th floor. He was like, "Listen, this is where the crawler's at. Like, you know, you'll definitely." And he said, "You'll see shadows crossing rooms." And now he did have an answer for why he thought people were crawling. He said, first of all, put yourself in their situation. A lot of them couldn't walk, right? You're going back far enough where not everyone, as Wendell talked about it, the overpopulation there, not everybody had access to wheelchairs, right?
Right.
And socks were kind of a thing too, right? They were kind of harder to get in a inpatient facility like this. So they said a lot of times it was, you know, could have been just patients crawling from one room to another, but you're just kind of seeing the shadow of it.
Yeah.
You know,
But Jeff, what I saw about a crawler though, and the reason I mentioned Waverly was because that was the one they said was a dark spirit. There was one of them that they thought wasn't a ghost, wasn't something from the past necessarily. It was a dark presence, and they called it the crawler. And I thought when he talks about Waverly, you'll see. But that's why I mentioned that, because I saw something about a crawler, and they said it was a dark presence, and I thought it was
Yeah.
at Waverly.
well,
All right.
you know, the last floor that we had investigated for the night was, since we were group 2, we went 2, 3, 4, and then came down to 1. 1 is interesting because as you go down one of the corridors, as Wendell brought it up, you know, built in 1864, it is actually a small barracks for the Civil War. It was also an infirmary. That portion was an infirmary for the Civil War. So they had several, you know, soldiers, I guess, in the Civil War, they explained to us, had passed away in that area. So we actually went and hung with those 2 gentlemen because at that time I didn't have a ghost radio, and that really intrigued me, right? So at the time, we kind of hung out with them, went back in this Civil War area. We were in an area that looked like somebody was giving a presentation that day, had a bunch of chairs facing forward. There's a little stage in there, table at the stage, you know? So we set up this, we're just kind of hanging out. My kids are sitting against the wall. His friend is sitting against the wall. Me and this gentleman are standing up by this table, and we're asking questions, and man, we're getting a lot of answers, just random answers, whether it be names, whether it be this, that, some of the stuff you can't get sounds like gibberish, but there's definitely something responding to our questions, right? And we're doing this for about 10, 15 minutes. And then, you know, it's slowly approaching 5:30. This thing's done at 6, and I had to use the bathroom real bad, right? So I'm like, dude, and I wanted to hit the shop before we left, get a couple souvenirs. So, you know, as we're sitting there, I'm just like, you know what, ghosts, and I just kind of scream out like, ghosts, if there's any final words you have for me as I depart from this area, I'm going to go ahead and give you a moment. What message do you have for me? Not 2 seconds after I finished that sentence, something literally said, you, and it came through loud. And I mean, I look at the guy who's ghost radio, and I'm like, I was shocked, dude. Because first of all, if you're familiar with a ghost radio, all it does is it goes through radio stations really fast. Now, you will hear occasionally a bit of some music for a second, or you'll hear maybe a commercial break or something. You don't hear cuss words because cuss words are not generally played on over-the-air radio stations. I think
No.
we can all agree on that.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
and it came through clear. And I looked at the guy who owned this ghost radio, and I'm like, first of all, did you hear that? He goes, oh, yeah, I absolutely
He heard
heard
it
that.
too.
Yeah. And I look at my kids and I'm like, did you guys hear that? And they're like, oh, yeah, Dad, we heard that. And then I look back at the guy who owns the ghost radio. I'm like, have you ever heard that before? And he goes, nope, not one time, never. I'm like, all right,
Leave
fair
it.
enough.
Leave it
Hey.
to Steve. Leave it to
Yeah.
Steve to bring in
Hey, you told
Ned
me
in.
Yep, I took that as a hey, I'm done for the evening. We hit the shop and everything. Now here's a little bit of strangeness as we're leaving. The guy, it's about 5:50 a.m. We got to get back to our hotel room, and the guy goes, "Hey, as you're leaving, be very, very careful. It's really foggy out there." I grew up in the Midwest. We get fog. Nothing to be alarmed about. Okay, whatever. Gotcha. Fog. Ooh, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I walk outside. I could barely see anything. I could see the lights coming from businesses, but when I say it was foggy, I mean, I am having trouble leaving this parking lot. I can't see 2 feet in front of me. I'm slowly going, having my kids look over the dashboard as well, like, Dad, I think you're on the road. I think you're on the road. Dude, it was foggy, right? And the weirdness is we get about 2 blocks away from Waverly Hills and it's gone. All the fog just suddenly is gone.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, what a way to
That's a
cap
movie.
off this evening. Now,
Yeah,
I
that's
will, I
awesome.
promise you, I will go back. I want to go visit the buildings in the back. I have to. I just, the first time I went, I wanted to experience the front one, because, a lot of the shows that I watched, they probably went into all the buildings, but, the crawler on Paranormal Lockdown was up in that
Yeah.
hallway, and I just had to see where that was. I just
Right.
had to. So what a great place, man.
I do have a question. Now, when that radio said that to you, that was in the Civil War area, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that's what.
Okay.
I'm sure
But
they
hold
over
on.
the years. Go ahead.
All right, but hold on. Now, during the Civil War, they were the Confederates, correct?
It is West Virginia, right?
Right. And you're a Yankee, right?
Oh,
I can see,
oh,
I can
Yeah.
see where maybe this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's
yeah.
cold.
So-
that's
yeah.
cold.
No, I can see where that's going.
right.
I would imagine over the years, as each kind of new management would come in,
Right.
new leaders, they would turn these different portions into something else.
Yeah.
So I imagine that there probably were other patients back in that Civil War area and everything. It's just known that you could see Civil War soldiers appear or disappear in that area. And whatnot. And it was also kind of the saddest part of that place is going back to what Wendell was talking about. It was the first time that they, at least what was explained to us. Now, I haven't looked at the history of it, but that they did the ice pick lobotomies. This
Yeah.
Yes.
doctor
Yeah.
brought an ice pick in from his house,
Yep.
right from his own bar, and started doing these ice pick lobotomies.
That
Yeah,
might be in
yeah.
one of the back buildings because they say that is one of the most haunted parts of that place is where they did the lobotomies.
Yeah, I think that's the medical building back there.
Yeah.
But they talked about it, and boy, I tell you, you look at the photos, and if you want to get a good sense of that place, Expedition X with Josh Gates last year did a really great. It was a 2-parter, I believe, episodes there, and they get some really good activity on their show as well. So I would highly suggest watching that. But definitely,
Now, the one last thing I want to say about that is when that was being built and stuff like that, and the Civil War started happening, they had some funds that were supposed to keep going into building that, and the Ohio 7th Cavalry came down and stole that cash.
oh wow,
So that put an end. So I think something in there knew you were from Ohio.
Probably, yeah. Probably my
Yeah,
accent
yeah,
was like, look at this
right.
dude. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah,
just such
yeah,
a clear answer. That's
yeah,
what got me. Look, all night, at that time I did not own a ghost radio. So the
right.
little bit of times we would run into this guy, we would get a little bit of this and that. I remember at one time when we were back on the second floor, the first floor that we had visited on there, those guys went off and one guy was writing down all the answers they were getting. And they were talking about how they were confused because they were like, yeah, it mentioned a rope and it mentioned this other thing hanging and everything. And my son just stopped and goes, well, if you follow this hallway down, there's a room with a bathroom where there's a piece of rope hanging right off the wall, like right from this pipe. And the guys were like, that's really odd. And so we all went into that room so they could see it. So some of the answers that those two gentlemen were getting were
Right.
related to some items they just hadn't entered the room
Wow.
yet, like this. So yeah, my son actually caught that one, which I thought was pretty
Right.
cool. So
I
yeah,
see.
Well, you
yeah.
gave Fairfield a 7. What do you give this one?
I would
Trans
absolutely
Allegheny.
probably give it at least, I'd probably give it at least an 8.5, 9. If there's an argument, look, I think I'm going to give it an 8.5 right now because I'm guessing when I go back the second time, I don't know when that'll be, and I do the back buildings. My guess is those back buildings are probably even potentially more haunted than the main one that we visited.
All right, the last one tonight that we're going to talk about is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. That's in Louisville, Kentucky. It was an original structure. It was a modest 2-story hospital built in 1910 to treat victims of the White Plague, as it was known, tuberculosis. This in Jefferson County was ravaged by the disease, so it was built. It was an isolated location thought to provide fresh air and sunlight to cure this disease. The epidemics got so bad by 1926, the Gothic-style 5-story building was complete, housing more than 400 patients. Treatment for that specific disease were all experimental at the time, and often very harsh, such as collapsing a lung to let that lung rest. Also, removing the ribs to make it easier for the person to breathe. Thousands died there, and the one thing that they do have there is the body chute or the death tunnel. It's towards the basement where they would wheel the dead people out to try to keep the morale of everybody else, that all the patients that were still alive, uplifting. So, Steve, how did you come across this place?
Again, watching a lot of videos, it is probably in the top 10, especially places in America. It's known in the top 10, along with your Trans Allegheny. It is, if you're a paranormal junkie like myself, it is definitely high on your list, if not at the top of the list. I'd probably make an argument that I wanted to visit there before I even wanted to go to Trans Allegheny. It just didn't work out. The booking and the tickets and everything just didn't work out as quickly as it did for Trans Allegheny. It's another one of those notorious places that you see on every single paranormal show. Probably every famous group, maybe even non-famous group, has been there, has done investigations there. As you stated, it is very isolated. It is way up on a hill, like away from the city. It's got woods that surround it all the way around. As far as the building goes, the massive size of this place would blow your mind. There's, like you said, there's 5 main floors. I'm pretty sure there is a basement as well. We weren't able to enter the basement per se.
Right.
Now what's interesting is if you look up on the 5th floor, it's almost like somebody took a small building and put it right on the roof of this mammoth place. So the 5th floor is much smaller than the rest of it, but is also stated to be probably one of the most active areas of that building. As you had mentioned, the death chute, I've been reading and seeing videos of the death chute the entire time I've been, kind of researching the paranormal. And, I will say, so, I mean, kind of starting off there, we did, in order for me to get both my kids there, we had to go on what's called Junior Ghost Hunters Night, because 3 Saturdays out of the month, you have to be 18 years old and older. Okay. But the third Saturday of every month, the third one, they would allow adults to bring children. Now, I didn't expect to see some of the youngsters, my kids, 13, 15, now 16, but at the time
Yep.
was 15. Man, I swear some of these people had, if I had to guess, people brought like 9-year-olds to this thing. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, wow. Now, I will say this, it gave me hope as a paranormal investigator that there's this younger generation, even the youngest generations, that are already watching and embracing and kind of, integrating this into their life. Whether I'd kind of wish to know how they heard stories, or, what I mean? But it definitely was interesting. And so yeah, I mean, I will say this: if I had one kind of negative thing to say about it, when I talked about Trans Allegheny, you were split up on floors and you were given an hour and a half on that floor, which, if you're a paranormal investigator and you're trying to take noise, camera, EVPs and all that, you appreciate that because you know that you're not going to get cross-contamination, at least
Right.
as much, right? There's 40 people at Trans Allegheny, but they're all in their separate areas, and you pretty much know what you're going to get. The difference at Waverly Hills, where they kind of just give everybody the run, they give you some general rules. They frown on you using flashlights. They really don't want you to. What they explained to us was there's a lot of shadow figures, and the second you pull out a flashlight, you're not. I mean, the shadow figure is going to be gone, right?
Right.
So, we kind of had to try to investigate on floors that other people weren't on, or areas we had to try to really watch. So we got up into what looked like a recovery room. This was the first time I had my own ghost radio. So we went into this recovery room area. It was on I believe it was on the 3rd floor, and it was all the way over in one of the corners. And as I was sitting there asking questions, I asked, were you a patient here? And right through the radio came prisoner, like loud
Ooh.
and distinguished.
Yeah.
Prisoner. And I was like, oh wow, like we all heard it clear as plain as day. And so, we had that happen. That was really cool. You'd see some shadows, but you didn't necessarily know paranormal, not paranormal. You get to the point sometimes where something is just so dark. Are your eyes kind of playing tricks on you? You know what I mean? And I had
Yeah.
that a little bit happen at Trans Allegheny as well, but Waverly, you get a lot of that. And what's interesting about Waverly, going back to what you guys were talking about, the tuberculosis ward, it has on one of the sides, the building, the way it's facing, there's an area kind of like a huge balcony on each floor where they used to wheel the person out on their beds and have them sit outside, because that was another idea, is that to get rid of the tuberculosis, you had to have fresh air. So they literally wheel these beds right up to this balcony and have everybody sitting there to get the fresh air, to get the sun. So that was really interesting, because that was an area that was a little bit more lit up. So you could see if you were seeing the shadows and everything. Audio, it's a little bit tougher when you're dealing with random people being in almost all locations. That was a little bit rough. We did enter the death chute. We walked and boy, let me tell you, that goes down far. And it is as interesting as you can think about it. I mean, it is dark. There's not a window to be had. You can understand how they must have had a pulley system on the side, because the one side is stairs, and then the other side's just literally a chute, a cement chute, where you could see that they probably had a rigging where they had something that would take the bodies down, and maybe could have been something that, you sat there and wound up and pulled it back up. Could have been, who knows? Could have been machine operated. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, that death chute is quite scary, just from the sense that how loud the sound is, even if you're whispering, and we, so that was pretty cool. Now, where I would say probably the most activity happened for us was, a lot of people towards the end of the evening, a lot of people left. And we were up on the 5th floor. They explained that there was a nurse back, I want to say it was back in the 1920s, something like that. And, since the people had tuberculosis, the workers there, again, another situation, the workers actually were not allowed to leave because of tuberculosis. So they had their own wards up there. They had areas where they lived. Well, up on the 5th floor, there were two major areas in between this one hallway. One of the areas was a childhood ward where if both parents had tuberculosis, your child was living up in this area with all the other children, okay? The other side was for patients who, once the tuberculosis got to their brain, they were sent up into this ward, basically waiting for them to pass away. Okay.
Was that room 502?
It was up there. Yeah, there was up there. And then
Yes.
there was a nurse. Supposedly the story goes the nurse hung herself because she either had a love affair and might have been pregnant, or she might have gotten tuberculosis herself and she didn't. So there's so many stories about this nurse up there. But so it is now one of the things that we would get some definitely some things coming through the ghost radio up on the 5th floor. It was the first time I own a REM pod, but I own a generic one. It's not like the official REM pod. And it's funny because my daughter always says, "Dad, you purchased a generic one. You purchased a lousy one." She goes, "Yours doesn't work. The ghosts don't like it." Over and over. And by the way, she ain't lying. It's never worked once. Never, right? Well, this guy I met from Kansas, he had his son there, and they had a legitimate REM pod. Okay, they had the real one. Now, the real one senses not only EMF, but it also senses temperature changes and fluctuations. So you'll get two different alarms depending on whether it's the EMF or whether it's the temperature flux. So I'm outside because what was cool about the 5th floor is you can walk out on certain parts of the roof, and it's just so awesome up there. Like, just really cool place to step out. And we're watching, and I'm talking to this guy from Kansas, and we're looking in, and we can actually see the REM pod. And that was the first time live that I ever seen a REM pod go off. And it's just sitting in this room because my generic REM pod never went off once. And I'm watching this REM pod through the window go off. And it just kind of took me back like, well, that's weird. No one's anywhere near. One thing I couldn't figure out whether it was the temperature one. I mean, obviously there were no open windows up there. We're there in the middle of, towards the end of June. So it's really hot, So, I mean, it's hot throughout that entire building. I think there was only one floor that actually had air conditioning. The rest is just whatever it is. It's hot, right? So, yeah, I mean, that just seeing that REM pod go off, and we got a lot of answers and responses through the ghost radio, which was really cool. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say is if I would like to go back, but I'd like to go with a much smaller crew. So that way we can kind of avoid any cross-contamination, knowing. I kind of wish they would separate it by floor, just like, hey, this group is going to go to this floor, things of that nature. So, I mean, it's definitely active, whether you're seeing shadows. They have one hallway up on the 4th floor. They kind of say it is the most haunted hallway in America. From a perspective of what Wendell was talking about, the crawler and shadow.
Let me correct that, and I apologize, Jeff. You were right about the crawlers at Trans Allegheny. Waverly had one they called a creeper, and that's the one.
Yep,
that's the one they thought was the dark.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they talked about that, Wendell, and that was, as far as I know, that was up on the 4th floor. There's this one hallway, because there are rooms. There's two hallways that would essentially go down the building, okay? There's the one that had that long balcony where you were kind of outside, and then there were rooms to your right-hand side, depending, what side you're. But then on the inside, there's also another hallway, and that's the hallway they're referring to as the most haunted hallway in America, because it's weird the way that the it's bent. You almost see like shadows kind of peeking around, looking at you like as you're coming, and then they go back and whether it be their room or where the hallway bends and you can't see what's down that part of the hallway anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and the crazy thing is, it was about 5:30, 5:40 in the morning. We're finally starting to get some sunlight coming through the building, but just a little bit. And my daughter turns to me and she goes, Dad, because we were walking purposely through that most haunted hallway. By then, there's really nobody left there. All right. And my
Right.
daughter looks at me and goes, Dad, it's actually creepier right now with the little bit of light coming in than it was when it was pitch black. And I had to agree with her. It was like this
Yeah.
weird, utter silence and just enough light to kind of bend through the hall into the hallways and stuff like that. It's a really
Yeah.
creepy place.
You got some brave kids.
Oh, yeah. And no doubt
Yeah.
about
For the
it. And,
record. For the record.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they love it, Wendell. That's the weird thing about, when people go on, I hate to call it ghost hunting, right? Because we're not hunting anything, right? But the exploration itself, right? That's, a lot of it isn't always going to be like you walking into the poltergeist home, right? Where things are just flying around, right? A lot of it, honestly, is quiet. It's kind of taking in the stories, taking in the lore of these locations, listening to the stories of the patients, what happened to them. The surprising thing about Waverly was they actually described it as, yes, it was a tuberculosis ward, but they said it was probably one of the best tuberculosis wards in America. It was the place, if you had tuberculosis, you wanted to go to because they actually treated their people well. Now, one of the paranormal aspects of that was, okay, well, if it was kind of a decent place to be if you had tuberculosis, then where did the hauntings come from? Obviously, Wendell, you talked about the amount of people who passed away. I mean, you're talking, some argue close to 10,000 people, right? Well, after the tuberculosis ward ended, a couple years later, they opened up a nursing home.
Yes.
And that
Yep.
nursing home conditions were so bad that the
Yeah.
state had to come in and shut it down. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
So some people actually theorize that the hauntings themselves, although some could be from the time of the tuberculosis ward, a lot of people speculate it was from the horrible conditions of the nursing home, because I think it ran, if I had to guess, up until like the 90s or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, a lot of people believe that the hauntings
Interesting.
from that.
It was closed down in 1982 after it reopened for a little bit, become a geriatric home or a nursing home, and conditions were so bad that they just closed it in 1982.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, the place is amazing. I mean, if you ever have an opportunity, I would definitely suggest anybody to go there. I would definitely, like I said, I would definitely want to go back, but if I went back, I would want it to be to a more private group, or maybe go there on like a weeknight where maybe it's a little bit less expensive to have, like a group come in and kind of rent the place versus, because I guarantee you, if there's a lot less people in the building, you are going to experience a lot more. I mean, we just had, because of the way it was set up at Trans Allegheny, we had a lot more happen because we knew we were in these areas alone. We didn't have any real cross contamination as far as sound goes. I mean, I guarantee we experienced some things at Waverly Hills. We had some odd happenings here and there, but you had to ask yourself, was it paranormal, or was it, Jim Smith and his daughter walking through the area?
Right.
You just, it's kind of hard to determine sometimes. So I'd probably, for right now, just because of the evening I had there and everything, I'd probably give it a solid 6.5. I
Okay.
do think that the potential is to be way higher, but I think it has to be kind of situational in a way. You got to go there when it's quieter. You got to go there with a smaller group. And you got to be able to have some opportunity to kind of get the gadgets out and kind of really spend some time in each area. So, yeah.
So that's a question I wanted to ask you. Now, if people out there wanted to start out doing this, what are some like non-expensive gadgets to start picking up to take to these places, or even like your local graveyard at night to walk around? What are some of the gadgets that a lot of people have?
Well, what I would suggest, that initially starting off, get yourself an EMF detector. I mean, you can get them for probably as cheap as 5, 10 bucks on, Amazon. They start to get kind of sophisticated. You don't really need a sophisticated EMF detector. Just keep in mind that it's reading electronic magnetic, fields. It's reading. So, you will get readings if you put it close to your phone, or you'll get it if a high EMF area, right? So you have to kind of be a little bit careful, kind of, be consistent with it. Put it near walls, kind of do as you walk through the area, really try to get a sense. Are you close to plugs? Are you not? I mean, you can still be close to a plug and it not go off at all. But if you're finding that the same area of the wall you keep coming across with the EMF is giving you, it's probably not paranormal, right?
Right,
But if you're walking down an area and it starts going off and it's not close to your cell phone or anything, and it's just kind of random hits, you might be onto something there. I mean, because there's no reason it should just go off on its own or anything like that. So that's the first thing I'd say. Secondly, get a digital recorder. Again, you can probably find them as cheap as 20, 25 bucks. You can get really sophisticated with them. That's to take what we refer to as EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. I haven't had a tremendous amount so far. It could be my recorder, could be, maybe I'm doing it wrong, could be user error. I've had some responses I couldn't quite hear,
right,
as well. Like I couldn't clarify what exactly they were saying, but it's an easy tool if you have obviously if you have a computer, you can come home, kind of put it on a wave reader, kind of take a look at, separate that little areas. Um,
right,
things of that nature. You'll definitely need a flashlight for sure, but then you start kind of getting into a little bit some of the more expensive toys. Um, my next favorite thing for me is my ghost radio. Cost me $100 on Amazon. I thought it's probably the funnest thing for me to use, right? Because it's the first thing that if I'm going to hear a response, it's actually going to come through audio. You
right,
kind of got to get used to differentiating between what's coming through from the radio stations versus, and you don't get a ton. So, I mean, it's kind of easy to tell what's coming from a radio station versus what's not. I've gotten things as long as a sentence on there where you'll hear word after word, and it can't be the same radio station because you won't hear a whole sentence from a radio. It's not on that radio station that long. It's literally flying through radio stations to create white noise,
right.
you know? So yeah, I would
Gotcha.
say stuff like that. I mean, you can up to $100. I mean, if you want to get a camcorder with night vision, that's something I haven't used it on any paranormal investigation yet, but I just picked one up because the next time I
Huh?
go, I want to be able to use
Oh,
night
cool.
vision.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, be able to
Cool.
see real well. Um, so yeah, and then obviously it just continues to go up. I mean, there's these ropes, these EMF ropes that have like 12 EMF detectors, and like a 12-foot can go up to like 32 feet. Those can get kind of expensive. They have these little musical boxes where motion detector. So if you set them down, they kind of look like a little coffin, and they'll make noise and music when something crosses it. That's pretty
Huh,
cool. They have something called like a death bell. It's just basically one of those old school bells or like service bells, but it also has an EMF detector. So the ghost can either essentially tap the bell itself, or if it goes across the EMF detector, the bell just goes off. I mean, these days, there's so many different tools.
right.
There's a lot of them I don't get into and I don't really buy. Like, a lot of people like this thing called the SLS camera. If you're familiar watching, it's that uses that Xbox Connect, and
Huh,
you'll see stick figures on a screen, right? So if you step in front of it, Jeff, let's say somebody's pointing the camera at you, you'll see you, Okay. But you'll also see a stick figure right where your body is. The computer is putting a stick figure there because it reads you and it reads what you're doing. And so it'll put a stick figure over you. Well, if you're showing that in an area where there's no human and you start to see these stick figures. So somebody theorized back then that these Xbox Connects were actually seeing ghosts or something that's not there physically. And it starts putting, so people turn these things into what they call an SLS. But I question that, honestly. I mean, I think, look, I've never seen it live, so I don't know. But, and then I try to stay away from I think it's called like the Avulus. So any of these apps or anything where it just has word databases that supposedly the ghosts could manipulate and create, I don't know. I don't get into that. It's just not my thing. Look, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I kind of stop at the ghost radio because I can understand where something on the other side may be able to manipulate sound in order to create something. If they're energy and you have energy kind of coming through this radio, maybe they can manipulate it, right?
Right. So the simple things to have is if you wanted to start out, a ghost radio, digital recorder, and what was the
EMF.
first thing?
EMF detector.
meter.
Yep.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you for coming on, man. It was an interesting topic, man.
Thank you.
What's your next place? What's your next place?
Well, I'm trying to get to the Ohio State Reformatory. I don't know if I'll be able to get there this year. I saw some ghost hunts set in August, but I haven't seen any set up for September yet. Definitely want to make it there. There's Madison Seminary. Also a place called the Gill House. Somebody just told me about in Galion, Ohio, the Gill House. There's a couple. I mean, Ohio, surprisingly, you don't have to travel far for there to be a haunted destination. So that's really cool,
man.
Yeah.
Well, we do appreciate you. Yeah.
Awesome job as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You know, Jeff, we're making him a superstar, right?
I'm trying, right?
Yeah. Nice job. Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, let me bring something up. It's that time of year. Pumpkin spice is starting to come out. Football is starting to happen. Air's getting a little bit of crisp. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a ghost story, 'tis the season to bring that up. If you like this program, leave a comment below. But if you have a ghost story and you'd like to share it with us, please give us an email at buriedstory74@gmail.com. And with that, have a good evening.